I am Elizabeth Stephenson, back at you with our latest installment. Today we'll be talking about the origins of humanity and the Creator's first real relationship with people. There's all sorts of creation stories that begin life with similar tales, usually a primary couple, most popularly Adam and Eve. In the Western world, we're likely most familiar with the Genesis account. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." Then sky, land, seas, vegetation, stars, then animals. Then God said it was good. And then he created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them male and female. He puts man in the Garden of Eden and gives him dominion over the land and animals and all good things. But he's told not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, lest he'll die. Then God makes a helper for Adam, woman. But the evil serpent entices the woman and convinces her to eat of that tree. She then in turn convinces Adam to likewise eat of its fruit. Then the eyes of both of them were opened to evil and they felt shame. They hear God walking in the afternoon, having a lovely stroll, coming to see his kids. So they hide and the Lord immediately calls them on what they had done. The man blames woman, woman blames the serpent, and so the Creator then mercifully punishes them. Not by killing them. Instead, he sends them out of the garden. He makes woman's childbearing painful and her desire for her husband and for him to rule over her. He curses Adam, saying that his work for his food will be hard until he himself returns to the ground. In Hinduism, the primary couple is Manu and Sharatrapa. In Norse mythology, it's Ask and Embla, who were the first two humans created by three gods. Mollusks and Magda were the Filipino versions. Zoroastrianism cosmology gives us Masha and Mashayana. In Vedic scriptures, the female bird Jiva becomes distracted by the fruits, signifying sensual pleasure. She momentarily forgets her lord and lover and tries to enjoy the forbidden fruit independently of him. This separating forgetfulness is Mahamaya, or enthrallment, or spiritual death, and it constitutes the bird's fall into the world of material birth, death, disease, and old age. In one Japanese creation myth, three invisible gods came into existence in the high plains of heaven, called Kanu, who were led by the Lord of the center of heaven. After them were 7 more generations, followed by a primeval couple who were siblings, husband and wife. The wife acted out of turn during the marriage ritual. They consummated and gave birth to a deformed evil child called Haruku, who was sent away. In due time, the wife later gave birth to more children who became the nation of man. Or in the Greek creation story, Zeus made Pandora as a punishment for Prometheus. Hermes had endowed Pandora with lies and pervasive words and cunning ways. According to Hesiod, here's what happened. Before this time, man lived upon the earth, apart from sorrow and painful work, free from disease, which brings in the death gods. But now the woman opened up the cask and scattered the pains and evils among men. Inside the cask's hard walls remained one thing only, which did not fly through: hope. The lid stopped her, but all others flew through, thousands of troubles wandering the earth. Now, if this were a woman's studies class, I'd probably tell you that these stories were created by man to exert his dominance over women. But that doesn't settle it at all. I mean, women can make up stories too, yet there's no contrary story to exert our dominance over man. Instead, you see a similar tale being told all over the globe with striking similarities in their tale. Obviously, many details have been left out and changed, but in a world mostly disconnected at the time, the people's idea of how we got here shares similar material, making the simplest answer most likely to be true. That's basically what happened. So let's say, for the sake of argument here, that it could possibly be true. How would that line up with all that we know about evolution in mankind? There's an excellent TED Talk about the origins of religion that likewise begs the question of how far back does the religious impulse go? When we talk about evolution and mankind, are we talking just about Homo sapiens or Homo heidelbergensis or Homo erectus or Homo habilis? Who could Adam and Eve even possibly be? Well, going back to a lot of what we discussed in the last chapter, human evolution has obviously been happening for hundreds of thousands of years. The oldest Homo sapien fossils are discovered from 195,000 BC. So you've got anatomically modern humans from at least 200,000 BC. Around 120,000 years ago, we started finding symbolic behavior, or things considered non-utilitarian, like burials with time-consuming grave goods and jewelry, to behaviorally modern humans making especially noteworthy changes around 60,000 BC. When we start seeing complex language, then around 50,000 BC. So it isn't until 40,000 BC, though, that Neanderthals call it a day. And at that point, you also see cave paintings, and they start to leave Africa. Though humans had been anatomically modern for quite some time by this point, it wasn't until 60,000 to 40,000 years ago that expert thinks that humans stopped embarrassing themselves and became behaviorally modern, meaning exhibiting complex symbolic thought, cultural creativity, and all of the other things that make humans human. Over just the last decade, archaeologists have uncovered a number of artifacts from several cave sites along the South African coast that reflect the activities of humans with the capacity of symbolism. This reveals an enhanced working memory, meaning that humans have the ability to envision and work with abstract concepts, like, for example, it would be easier to kill an animal with a sharp tool. It means mental time travel, like when I go kill an animal, I should bring a sharp tool so I'm ready. It means imagination. Imagine how easy it'll be to kill an animal now. And it also means the capacity to understand and manipulate symbols such as language and art, like cave paintings. This enhanced working memory was called by Genevieve von Petzinger the God spot. There was a study in the 90s using an MRI to see if there was one spot in the brain that's specifically physically and measurably connected with God, but it turns out there's actually many different parts of the brain working together. Up until genetic evidence became available, there were two dominant models for the dispersal of modern humans. The first being the multi-regional hypothesis, and it proposed that Homo janus only contained a single interconnected population as it does today. So no separate species like Homo erectus or chimpanzees, and that its evolution took place worldwide continuously over the last couple of millions of years. The other being the out of Africa option. And that model proposed that modern Homo sapiens speciated in Africa relatively recently, approximately about 200,000 years ago, and the subsequent migration through Eurasia resulted in nearly complete replacement of other Homo species. Yet, through new technological advances, we're left with little room to deny our descent from apes. Crazier still, we did some serious commingling with our relative species. You very likely have about 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA in you now. Dr. Douglas Jacoby said that after encountering the evidence, he concluded that common descent was inescapable. He quotes Dennis Alexander, the director of the Faraday Institute for Science and Religion, and an author, and he said that common descent from apes is about as certain as anything that you can find in biology. The signatures of our evolutionary past are indelibly inscribed within our genomes. We are walking genetic fossil museums. And this would seem like a fatal blow to the creation account, except very recent advances in genetics have circled us right back there. In 1984, a multinational team of scientists started the Human Genome Project to work backwards through time using modern Homo sapiens DNA from 142 cultures to essentially reverse engineer the construction of humans. Results were published in 2003 concluding that we do all in fact share a common male and female ancestor. And what's incredibly interesting is that all humans alive today are related to them individually, which means that you're related to everyone on Earth if you go back far enough. It's super fascinating stuff. They followed the chain through women first. In addition to nuclear deoxyribonucleic acid, humans have mitochondrial DNA. And mitochondria are the powerhouses of a cell, and they have their own DNA. Mitochondria are inherited through one's mother, and so their DNA is frequently used to trace matrilineal lines of descent. mtDNA is generally passed unmixed from mothers to children of both sexes along the maternal line. Matrilineal descent goes back to our mothers and their mothers and their mothers until all female lines converge. By following only the mtDNA sequence gifted through mothers, they built an exact analog detailing a mosaic of human lineage in astounding size. Just like you'd see in a family tree with many branches, some of them did quit early as a couple failed to produce heirs. However, the longest unbroken chain actually does go back to one woman. In biology and genealogy, the most recent common ancestor, the MRCA, is a most recent individual from which all organisms in a group directly descended, okay? So in human genetics, the mitochondrial Eve, as she's debatably been dubbed, is the maternal MRCA of all currently living humans, i.e. she is the most recent woman from which all living humans descended in an unbroken line purely through their mothers until all lines converge back to her. So a 2009 estimate cites her age between 152 to 234,000 years ago. So she lived later than Homo heidelbergensis and the emergence of Homo neanderthals, but earlier than the out of Africa migration. Researchers trace the male population second. So similar to the mtDNA, the Y chromosome is present as a single-sex chromosome in the male individual and is passed on to male descendants without reincarnation. It can be used to trace patrilineal inheritance and to find the Y chromosomal atom, the most recent common ancestor of all humans via the paternal line. Right now, it looks like Y Adam lived between 237 to 581,000 years ago. So there used to be a large discrepancy between the dates for MT Eve and Y Adam. Now, based on better estimates, thanks to a 2015 study, like 2015, y'all, this is cutting edge material. Like, I have salad dressing older than this stuff in my refrigerator right now. I think it's so cool. But the hypothetical man, Y Adam, is estimated to have lived in East Africa 250,000 years ago. This means that the dates for MT Eve and Y Adam converge around 150,000 years ago. So this convergence is in a line with humanity's origin from fossil record. And it also comports fairly well with the archaeological record that places the first evidence for symbolism between 70,000 and 80,000 years ago. And the research isn't completed yet. Right now, the age of the MRCA is still unknown. In other words, when did MT Eve and Y Adam's children meet and have a joint baby? This is necessarily younger than them. It's estimated around 200,000 years, but it may be as recently as only 3,000 years ago. That's a huge time window. And we could likely find that these individuals lived at the same time and were our primary couple, Adam and Eve. My belief is that this MRCA can turn out to be our Adam and Eve, or that it'll be Noah and his wife, which I'll discuss in the next chapter. Nonetheless, we now have genetic proof that our man was created first. And we have plausible evidence that would put the MRCA in the right place at the right time window to be the real Adam and Eve. And what I mean by this is that the Genesis account of Adam and Eve mentions several specifics about when and where they are. First of all, there's the location. So Genesis cites Eden in between the Tigris and the Euphrates, which are still present in modern-day Iraq today. It also mentions the Pishon and the Gihon rivers, which no longer exist, but they surely flowed into the Persian Gulf, okay? So you can actually still find this on Google Maps. If you just even look up ancient Mesopotamia, it'll pop right up for you. And so these are the names and the places of the people that you studied in history class. You're looking at most popularly cities like Sumer and Babylon, Jericho, Palestine, and Nineveh. I'm sure all cities that you've heard of before, many of which are still present today. So to further figure out their timing, you can actually skip ahead a couple of chapters to some easily missed details written into the genealogy record running from Adam to Noah. Through that account, we know with some certainty that there was 1,056 years between Adam and Noah, or 7 generations of kids. So Genesis 4, verses 1 through 22, ever so casually mentions things about those 7 generations of children who married people that were herders. They played stringed instruments, they built cities, they even had bronze and iron, all quite advanced stuff and clearly not capable of being just from Adam and Eve themselves. So we know around 9,000 BC, humans first cultivated wheat. They developed complex communities and permanent residences, so it had to be later than that. And then around 4,000 BC, we get bronze. As for stringed instruments, archaeological digs have identified that some of the earliest stringed instruments were in ancient Mesopotamia. They found sites like lyres in Ur, and they were about 3,000 years old. Noah was from Ur, which was founded between 4,500 BC and about maybe 3,200 BC. And then meteoric iron has been used by humans since at least 3,200 BC. So since it specifically cites iron, we know that all of that stuff had to have occurred after 3,200 BC. So all of that puts the latest possibility for Noah to be after 3,200 BC, or in other words, if he was 1,056 years from Adam, then Adam had to have been born soon thereafter, 4,256 BC. And I was pretty excited about my research when I figured all of this stuff out and did some, I mean, it was really just simple addition and math, but it reminded me of a stat that I had come across along the way. Up until I think it was about the 1800s, it was believed that the world was created in 4004 BC, which was curiously close to my estimation. So I went back and I eagerly dug up that research, which was done by the Archbishop of Ireland, James Ussher, in 1650 AD. And then it was updated in 1940 by somebody else. But he had used the astrological timetables and related ancient holidays for most of his work. After switching between the Julian and the Gregorian calendar, it was determined that perhaps as early as 4,236 BC is believed to be the earliest fixed date of human history, which is a mere 20 years difference from my own estimated timeline. The difference being that I used archaeology and the resources that we found from carbon dating kind of stuff. And he used the stars and the calendar of maps and holidays to figure out his 2 times. So they relate well to each other and we approach it from different angles. The main difference though is that I'm saying that Adam and Eve lived then, not that the world was created then. There's a big difference there. So if your head is exploding right now, like, you're not alone. Like, I nerd out about this kind of stuff, and it was mind-boggling to me. Like, all of the pieces were there, but it didn't make sense until I released my preconceived notion that Adam and Eve were the first humans. That was actually a notion that I grew up believing. But when I reread the exact words more closely, noticing there's actually a lot more separation between first of mankind and those created on the 7th day, whom he blessed, giving them the land and animals, so that they were fruitful and would multiply. He said his work was good, and then he rests. He rests. Like, the next chapter then dives into this whole other account of Adam and Eve and their story, like they're two totally separate thoughts. To be more specific, when making Adam, he forms a man, not the first man or this new thing called man. There's a familiarity in the wording used. Then it says something new, which I think is super key. God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. The Creator had been making animals, and they had been proliferating the known earth for millennia. But with this man, he made a departure from all of those other bipedal hominids, and he did something different from what he had been doing. In addition to forming man in his image, he also gave him a soul. Everyone else had just been bodies. But Genesis 2:7 notes it differently and separately because it was different and separate. That is crucial and absolutely enormous in effect. You can imagine the Creator in his art studio hollering over his shoulder back at the heavenly crowd, like, you know what would be really cool? Like, I'm gonna kick things up a notch. And so maybe that was a part of his plan from the beginning, though. Maybe soulless automatons would have never been satisfactory to him. Maybe it was a new idea. But what I'm saying in my hypothesis is that the intelligent designer created us, his most advanced work of art, with both tangible and intangible elements. The tangible is the body, bones, organs, cells, etc., which the Creator designed to last as long as there was physical life in us. It's the tent in which the intangible parts of us dwell. The intangible aspects of the human are those which are immaterial: soul, spirit, intellect, free will, conscience, emotions, personality, things that random genetic mutations from stardust could never create naturally. The Creator designed those things to exist beyond the physical. It's these immaterial parts of humanity that enable us to relate to the Creator. So Adam had a body and he got a soul. Just like I have a body and have a soul. You have a body and have a soul. So when Genesis 2:7 says that the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and that he became a living being, the words became a living being indicate a definite beginning in which Adam's soul and body came into life at the same time. So a soul is the incorporeal essence of a living being. Depending on the philosophical system, a soul is either immortal or mortal. In Judeo-Christianity, only human beings have souls. In Hinduism and Jainism, all biological organisms have souls. It is the soul that is the real nature of a person rather than the body. This soul or spirit is called Atman. It's eternal. It is a Hindu's goal in life to discover their true self as Atman and to realize oneness with Brahman, the ultimate reality. The Atman is indistinct from Brahman, who is the supreme spirit. Thus, that supreme soul is present in everything and everyone. Anima mundi is the concept of world soul connecting all living organisms on planet Earth. Plato agreed. He said that this world is indeed a living being endowed with a soul and intelligence, a single visible living entity containing all other living organisms by which nature and all are related. The Stoics believed that it is the only vital force in the universe. Similar concepts hold in Chinese cultures as qi. Qi is believed to be a vital force forming any part of a living thing. Qi literally translates as breath, air, gas, and figuratively as material energy, life force, or energy flow, which is nearly identical translation for the word spirit as well, which is why I feel confident that when Genesis 2 says that the breath of life is put in Adam, that the soul is what it was referring to. Similar concepts, Atman in Hinduism, Nephesh in traditional Jewish cultures, Chi in Igbo religion, Poema in ancient Greek, Mana in Hawaiian culture, Jung in Tibetan Buddhism, Manitou in the culture of the indigenous Americans. Even Western pop culture gives us the Force and Jediism from Star Wars, or Eastern pop culture gives us Dragon Ball and the one-man punch. So this all relates directly back to our early earlier conversation about the power of God being synonymous with energy. All of these are synonyms from all over the world. Everyone is saying the same thing, relating it to this inherent, personally unique entity beyond that which exists in fiery brain transmissions. It's really incredibly grand. Even the word itself feels inadequate to describe the beauty of unity here. So call it what you want. Adam got it, just like you and I've got it. For the sake of clarity, we'll use the word soul moving forward. And I believe this because of what happens next. I used to believe that free will was the first gift, and I'll talk about that more in a second, but that's entirely untrue. Next, the Creator basically woos Adam. He gives him loads of food and resources. He plants him in a sweet pad in a nice garden. He gives him responsibility. He gives him a personal relationship. There's a beautiful story of the Creator bringing all of the animals to Adam just to see what Adam will name them. Parents do that with their kids all the time. My niece decided to call the new teddy bear that I got her for Christmas Doc. So that's what we all call the teddy bear. It's very personal and intimate and giving to Adam. Then he gives him free will. The catch is that there is a tree in the garden that Adam is told not to eat from. Really, I don't think the exact particulars matter. Was it really an apple or any fruit? What I think is important here is that Adam is told not to do something. And it's a painfully simple thing not to do. You can have anything but that. For when you eat of it, you will surely die. So rather than preventing Adam from eating of it, he gave him a choice. So why would God place a tree, real or symbolically, and then forbid him to eat of it? God wanted Adam to obey, but God gave Adam the freedom of choice to choose. Without choice, Adam would have been like a prisoner, and his obedience would have been hollow. The trees provided an exercise in choice, with rewards for choosing to obey, and sad consequences for choosing to disobey. It's all so very loving and deep on this is a very thoughtful level. So when I imagine how it feels, the best thing I can relate it to now is like a forced compliment. For example, Camera Kate, tell me I'm pretty. Like seriously, tell me I'm pretty.
You're pretty.
I mean, she's just saying that because I told her to, though. Like, it doesn't make me feel good. I don't trust that she thinks that I'm pretty or believe it to be true. You don't mean that. You're just saying it because I told you to. It doesn't mean anything. I don't feel encouraged. And so the Creator demonstrates how much He loves us, but also how much He wants us to feel truly free to love Him. The next gift that He gives is a helper. Adam needs someone to be with him. And I've always found it interesting in this part of the story that even though he has a one-on-one, 100% connection, for lack of a better word, with the Creator in a perfect, unfallen world, Adam still needed a wife. It goes to show that man needs more than just God. He needed a female counterpart to help him. He's needy and incomplete without her. And I think that's why the story of her coming from his rib is almost symbolic of how at the most intrinsic level he needs her beside him, not at his head to rule over him or at his feet to be trampled on, but wrapped around his heart. It's beautiful. So an intelligent designer creates man and woman that they may rule over the animals. All they're told to do is be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. They're not even told to worship the Creator. They don't have to jump through any hoops at all, just be themselves. And I think it's really cool how eating and hanging with the animals and baby making are still the best things in life. And it's cool how the Creator gifted them with all of the best things. It was so very pure, personal and loving and timeless. Then comes the infamous story of Eve eating the forbidden fruit. The story goes, the snake appealed to Eve's logic. It told her that she misunderstood the instruction. It made her doubt the Creator's goodness and intent, and it made it seem like eating the fruit was no big deal. And eating the apple per se wasn't the problem. We don't even know that it was an apple. It could have been anything. The problem was that the particular action was forbidden. So she eats it and then she gives it to Adam. He eats it and both of their eyes are opened to evil. The fruit was referred to as containing the knowledge of good and evil, symbolic. But immediately they feel shame and they go run and hide from the Creator walking in the garden looking for them. He knew what they had done, and he punishes them accordingly. But that's the story of how sin came into the world. It's an immoral act considered to be a transgression against a divine law. Sin is something that a religion says is wrong. If you don't believe in God, then you don't believe in sin, but you likely believe in right and wrong. Back then, there was no written code of conduct except for that one rule. It was the Creator's house, so Creator's rules. If he says you don't get to eat of something, then you don't get to eat of something, and it's wrong if you do. Adam and Eve broke the rule, so they did something that they shouldn't have done. Sin is a result of giving in to temptation. Temptation is caused by evil forces seducing us to commit acts. So, fun fact, did you know that snakes actually used to have legs? And as a part of their punishment, they were forced to crawl on the ground. You can actually go to fossil museums today and see remains of snakes with legs on display. But again, I don't think it's necessarily important whether it was a snake or a serpent at all. What is important is that an external force or something or someone who wasn't the Creator was influencing them to do something wrong. The point being that there is a character opposing the Creator without cause or provoking. That character can and will manipulate humans to do their bidding. And we discussed this oppositional character, Satan, and his rebel team in chapter 2, so check that out if you missed it. But now sin has entered the world, and that sucks. One person ruined it all for us. But the good news is that one person will fix it all for us while still maintaining free will. So there's balance and equal retribution. So the sixth gift given to man is a merciful punishment. Rather than putting Adam and Eve to death, he instead only punishes them. And through these precedents, we learn that each man has a role to play in their salvation. When we do wrong, it has a cause and an effect. But the Creator gives us hope. It reminds me of that Grecian story, Hope Remained, it says. And that is why hope remains today, that one day we'll return to an idyllic state. So the big idea is that we're soulful humans created by an intelligent designer to live on earth where we can spend all of our days eating, reproducing, working, and living however we choose. If we choose to love Him back, then one day our souls will be united with the Creator. But there's more to come about that stuff later. Next time we'll be talking all about what happens next, the descendants of the primeval couple and the start of human civilizations and the origins of religion. But in the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts about Adam and Eve and any primeval couple and the creation of sin. Like, how do you think it happened and how do you believe? Or do you even believe that there's no such thing and we're just soulless elements? So please share your thoughts and share this video. You can click on the links below to follow my series or connect with my Facebook group. There's a lot of great resources and more links on top of other links on top of other links. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you all next week. Yes, if every time that you flip through screens, if you could add a huzzah, that would be great.
Superstar.
Yes.